Have you ever wondered what would happen if all of Earth's oceans suddenly vanished? We all know that our planet is largely covered in water, with over 70% of its surface being submerged beneath the waves. But aside from the obvious fact that we'd be in some pretty big trouble if all that H20 up and disappeared, it is interesting to consider just how much of an impact this would have on the world around us. Let's take a look at what would happen if all the oceans dried up. First things first, let's talk about all the people who would be affected by this monumental event. Currently, around 40% of humanity lives within just 100 kilometers or so of the coast. In fact, more than half of the world's population lives within 300 kilometers of a sea or ocean. If all the oceans were to dry up overnight, this would mean that hundreds of coastal cities would be left in ruins, wiping out entire countries from the face of the earth and leaving millions, perhaps even billions of people homeless. Major cities like New York, Los Angeles, Shanghai, Tokyo, and London would all be destroyed, resulting in a mass extinction event on a scale not seen since the end of the dinosaurs. But what about the animals that currently live in the oceans? Well, they wouldn't fare much better either. As you might expect, a sudden lack of water would mean bad news for most marine life. Creatures that currently dwell in the depths of the ocean would be left stranded on dry land where few could survive. Fish such as clownfish, tuna, sharks, and whales would either die or frantically search for new homes in the remnants of the world's lakes and rivers. Some species like the anglerfish, which live near the bottom of the ocean, might actually benefit from this change. Since sunlight can't penetrate the depths, these creatures don't rely on it to survive, meaning they could simply move into the newly formed deserts and set up shop there. Of course, some marine life, including crabs and lobsters, would likely head for the hills, so to speak. They are known as amphibious crustaceans because they spend part of their life cycles in both salt and fresh water, making them well suited to surviving on land. Some animals like starfish and coral would simply die. These animals are entirely dependent on their marine environment and couldn't possibly live on dry land. There is also the possibility that many ocean-dwelling animals will try to simply wait it out until the oceans refill. This is especially true for animals that are already adapted to living in low-oxygen environments like deep-sea creatures. For example, one study published in 2019 found that fish living near the bottom of the ocean have the ability to essentially slow down their metabolism when oxygen levels are low. If all the water on Earth were to suddenly vanish, it's possible that these same animals could enter a state of suspended animation until the oceans return, although this is obviously pure speculation. As for birds, well, it depends on the species. Seabirds like penguins and albatrosses would struggle to find food without all the fish in the sea and would likely die off. On the other hand, birds that live inland would probably fare much better. Some species might even benefit from the changes, particularly those that live near dry lakes and deserts. Animals like coyotes, foxes, and jackrabbits could thrive in these areas, which would suddenly become much more hospitable to life. Now, this next one might seem counterintuitive, but if all the oceans on Earth suddenly evaporated, we'd likely see a decrease in the amount of carbon dioxide in our lower atmosphere. Oceans play a major role in regulating the global climate and absorbing excess CO2 from the atmosphere. And speaking of ozone, another byproduct of evaporating oceans would be the release of ozone gas. Today, the Earth's oceans contain around 60 billion metric tons of ozone. This would all be released into the atmosphere if oceans were to vanish, leading to an ozone-rich air layer forming in our lower atmosphere. This layer would trap heat very effectively, leading to a runaway greenhouse effect. In other words, our planet would become a literal oven. Surface temperatures could rise by as much as 30 degrees Celsius, hot enough to kill off most life on Earth and definitely hot enough to prevent any sort of meaningful human survival. The story doesn't end there, though. A dramatic rise in global temperatures would have far-reaching consequences. For example, melting glaciers and ice sheets would lead to rising sea levels, further inundating coastal regions. Water vapor from the oceans would also disappear from the atmosphere, leading to an abrupt end to the water cycle. No more rain, no more snow, no more clouds, nothing. Global wildfires would likely consume everything in sight as dry vegetation is rapidly consumed by fire. Fires would rage for months before being extinguished by the lack of available fuel and the total destruction of our planet's forests. On a smaller scale, everyday objects would be affected too. Oceans help keep our planet's land masses moist, allowing plants to grow and ecosystems to thrive. Without oceans, the majority of the Earth's landmass would become arid and barren. Deserts would spread across the globe, eliminating the homes of countless species of plants and animals. As a result, erosion would also occur at a much higher rate. Without the stabilizing force of ocean waters, coastal cliffs and beaches would quickly erode, causing massive landslides and reshaping the planet's surface. Soil would turn to dust and blow away with the wind, changing the shape of mountains and valleys. But maybe one of the strangest things that would happen if all the oceans suddenly vanished is that the shape of our planet would change. That's right. The oceans play a major role in keeping the Earth a bit wider at the equator than it is tall from pole to pole. As the water evaporates, Earth's shape would shift, becoming more spherical. What's happening here is that the centrifugal force caused by the Earth's rotation would have less of an effect on the planet's shape. This would likely lead to a slight decrease in diameter at the equator, flattening the planet slightly. There's also the matter of gravity. The ocean water's gravitational pull helps keep our planet slightly wider at the equator than it is tall from pole to pole. Without all that water, the gravitational force at the poles would increase slightly, potentially affecting the planet's rotation and orbit. So, if all the oceans on Earth suddenly evaporated, our planet would become a bit wider at the equator, a bit flatter overall, and a bit heavier at the poles. So now you know just how important our oceans are to life as we know it. Hopefully, this video has helped you appreciate just how delicate our planet's systems really are and made you think twice before flushing the toilet next time.